They toasted to family legacy and left my name off every glass. The champagne fizzed like static as glasses clinked beneath strings of golden patio lights. Laughter drifted through the October air, crisp and smug, curling around the hedges like smoke. I stood just outside the perimeter of the tent, fingers curled around a plastic cup of lukewarm soda, watching from the fringe like a stranger at her own funeral. No one looked up. Logan stood beneath the oak tree wrapped in fairy lights. A champagne flute raised his voice, clear and calculated. "To the future of Grant Tech," he said, "and to everyone who made it possible, those who believed, those who stayed." Another round of clinks, another round of eyes avoiding mine. I used to build what they called dreams. Now I was the ghost they wouldn't look at. The last time I stood in this yard, I had ink-stained fingers and a head full of machine learning code. That was before my prototypes became his product. Before Camille turned from co-builder to co-conspirator. Before family became something said through clenched teeth. "Smile," Logan Camille chirped from his side blonde waves, glossy under the lantern glow. She nudged him toward the photographer like they were royalty, and this was their coronation. I watched the flash flicker over and over, capturing a reality I no longer existed in. "You should come closer," someone muttered. I turned, one of my second cousins barely out of college holding a plate of brisket. "You're in the shadows. Ruins the group shots." "I'm not in the group," I said softly, but he'd already walked off. Camille raised her glass again, her voice lilting with venom disguised as wit. "To those who never cracked under pressure," she said, "and who kept the vision alive when others couldn't handle the weight." A beat of silence. A few eyes darted to me, then quickly away. I sat at the far end of the garden table alone. No seat card, no glass. Just a white napkin folded too precisely and a view of everyone else's backs. My mother floated by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, pausing only long enough to refill Logan's glass. She didn't look at me. "Proud of you, son," my father said, clapping Logan's shoulder. "You've earned this. You stuck it out." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the words pass over me like a wind that didn't touch. Later, as dusk deepened and voices blurred into the buzz of wine and history rewritten, a younger cousin sidled up to me, barely 15 eyes too wide to have been coached yet. She leaned in, whispering, "Didn't you help start that company?" I smiled, but not with joy. Just a quiet, practiced pull of my lips. "Not according to them," I said. Inside the house was colder, quieter. I moved through the hallway like I didn't belong, though my fingerprints were in the paint, the light switches, the doorknobs. On the far wall above the credenza hung the founding photo of Grant Tech, the one I remembered. Except it wasn't. The frame was the same, the lighting, even Logan's awkward half-smile. But I was gone. Cropped out, erased cleanly like I'd never been there at all. And in my place, just air. History's not always written by the victors. It's edited by those with better PR. The morning after the party, the house was quieter than I remembered. No champagne, no speeches. Just the steady hum of an old refrigerator and the echo of footsteps, not mine. I moved through the hall like a trespasser. Every corner whispered that I didn't belong. And still, I climbed the stairs to the second floor, past the family portraits, Logan as a toddler, Logan at graduation, Logan shaking hands with a governor. I wasn't in any of them. The missing photo haunted me more than the silence. But the real evidence wasn't on the walls. It was 2 floors below, behind a door. No one opened anymore. The basement office hadn't changed. It still smelled like soldering fumes and printer toner. Dust clung to the air as if even particles hadn't been disturbed since I left. I flicked on the old desk lamp. Whiteboards lined the walls, smudged with half-erased flowcharts. A post-it note near the monitor read, "Athena V1, don't touch until passcode patch." My fingers hovered over the worn keyboard. Flashback 2019. We were packed into this basement like hackers on a caffeine bender. I was at the center of the codebase, Logan tweaking front-end widgets, Camille combing through cloud deployment. "This protocol has never run outside simulation," I warned. Camille grinned. "That's why it matters. If this works, it changes everything." I believed her once. Believed both of them. Back then, we called it Athena, like it was a real goddess watching over logic. Justice Elegance. I named it. I wrote the damn neural syntax engine from scratch. I blinked hard and the memory dissolved. The air was colder now. Back upstairs, I opened my old laptop buried in a drawer, half dead, still wrapped in the charger's coiled leash. The battery whined. I tapped into Grantech's press portal, digging through public archives. Every launch, every investor memo, every award ceremony. The official narrative had one voice. Logan, Camille, board members, advisors. My name nowhere. A ping interrupted the spiral. Vivian Brooks subject. They used what you built. Just that. A link followed. Encrypted. No sender tag, but the signature at the footer was unmistakable. VB, I clicked. A hidden Git repository opened, dark-themed console glowing with familiar indentation. I scrolled through files. Old ones. Mine. And there, buried deep inside the architecture folder, was a commit signed in 2020. Initial Athena Core v1.7. Author M. Grant. Hash num VE89A8F. My breath caught. I clicked metadata. Last modified October 6, 2023. Editor Camille Rhodes. 2 days after I resigned. My name had been scrubbed from the outside world, but not from the code. It still pulsed under the surface like a heartbeat buried but alive. And Camille had touched it, after I walked away. After she looked me in the eye and said, "It's best if you disappear now." She didn't just let them erase me. She built a new version with my bones still inside. You can't erase someone who built the foundation unless everyone else agrees to forget her too. The city was still sleeping when I opened my laptop. Sunlight crept through the blinds in long, reluctant strips slicing across my cluttered desk. I sat cross-legged on the floor, coffee gone cold beside me, fingers flying over keys. The Git repo Vivian had sent was real, and worse, it was everywhere. I cross-referenced the Athena v1.7 core with Grantech's newly released API documentation available on their investor portal. Line by line, call by call, it matched. Every modular decision tree, every adaptive feedback loop. All of it had my original architecture at its bones. They hadn't even bothered to change the structure, just polished the surface and slapped a new logo on it. A ghost in their machine. My ghost. I opened my inbox and wrote, fast fingers tight with control. To Camille Rhodes, subject Athena codebase, licensing inquiry body. I see you've recycled the original architecture without attribution. You know exactly what this is. Don't pretend otherwise. Her reply came 8 minutes later, as cold and polished as her LinkedIn photo. Subject Athena. You forfeited any claims when you exited without contest. Let's not confuse nostalgia with ownership. See. I stared at the words until they blurred. The cafe was quiet, tucked inside a brick alley in Brooklyn. Vivian Brooks was already there, a pair of tortoiseshell glasses perched low on her nose, dark curls pinned back like a librarian hiding a dagger. She didn't offer pleasantries, just slid a folder across the table. SEC filing for Grantech's IPO, she said, voice low. You might want to read page 12. I flipped it open. Camille Rhodes and Logan Grant listed as co-creators of Athena AI. No mention of my name, no footnotes. No asterisks, just clean gleaming theft. I looked up. They've been preparing this for months. Vivian nodded. They've built their empire on your silence. She sipped her coffee, then reached back into her briefcase and pulled out another document. Smaller. Older. Your original IP agreement, she said. Filed before the prototype even got funding. You still own 6.25% of the core tech. My breath hitched. I thought that was voided. You thought wrong. They're hoping you'd forget, or that you wouldn't bother. I stared at the page. My signature at the bottom, dated. Real. Unforged. They didn't just erase me from press releases. They erased me from memory. But not from the books. Not from the law. Vivian leaned in, elbows on the chipped table. We don't need noise, she said, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. We need precision. Are you ready to reclaim it quietly, or do you want fire? I looked her dead in the eye. I want both. They thought I left nothing behind, but code keeps secrets, and I wrote mine in fire. The lab was chaos. Perfect chaos. Cables tangled like vines, monitors stacked in uneven towers, the hum of overworked processors bouncing off exposed brick. Queens wasn't glamorous, but in Theo Lin's co-working bunker machines never slept, and neither did guilt. He looked up as I walked in, eyes behind fogged glasses, narrowing with recognition and maybe something else. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since I resigned, not since he didn't say a word in my defense. "You look determined," he said. I dropped the USB on the table between us. "I need you to prove I'm not crazy." Theo raised an eyebrow but plugged it in without argument. Vivian's document had led me here, but paper only said what people allowed. Code, though, code didn't lie. Not when you knew where to look. Lines of terminal output blurred down the screen as Theo dug through the backup repo, his fingers moving like muscle memory. "You're lucky this is still mountable," he muttered. "Old school encryption hardware keys. You really went full ghost mode back then." "I had to," I said. "They were already shifting the narrative. I thought if I left clean, they'd leave my name intact." Theo glanced at me, hesitating. But he didn't say sorry. Not yet. Then a pause. A screen freeze. Theo zoomed in. Found something, he said, tapping. "This commit tag, look at the SHA signature." I leaned in. The hash glowed at me like a scar. #5DC2A. Signed by M. Grant, my original encrypted dev key. Not just a name, a lock. My lock. Theo pulled up the timeline graph, scrolling through branches and forks. The mainline trunk showed something we weren't supposed to see: an integration push in July 2020, months after I'd left. Camille's name appeared as committer. But the credentials mine. "That's not possible," Theo whispered. "Unless..." "She used my key," I said. "She had access to my dev drive back then. But this is beyond theft. It's impersonation." Theo leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "They embedded your code into the Athena trunk, then used your name to authorize final integration. No asterisk, no version note. That's what went into production." Silence filled the lab, heavy with heat and betrayal. Outside rain tapped against the windows like someone trying not to be heard. He turned to me. "You sure you want to do this?" I met his eyes. "It's already been done. I just want the credit." The terminal blinked again. Theo decrypted Camille's commit metadata and the signature confirmed it. Post-resignation modification using my private credentials. The encryption shell even logged her IP address. I didn't flinch. "This isn't just theft," I said. My voice was even. Cold. Certain. "It's fraud at IPO scale. They called it innovation. I called it amnesia with an NDA stapled to it." Vivian's office sat 23 floors above the Midtown buzz, a glass and steel sanctuary built to make people confess without raising their voice. The walls were white, the chairs angular. Nothing cushioned, nothing sentimental. The view stretched out over Manhattan like a challenge. She slid a manila folder toward me. "You're going to want to read this carefully." Inside the original term sheet from 2020, the one Camille claimed had cleaned things up when I resigned. I remembered signing it in a haze, burned out disillusion, convinced I was stepping away from chaos with dignity. Vivian tapped the lower section. "Notice anything missing?" There it was. Line 14B, intellectual property reassignment clause, left blank. Not omitted. Just never executed. "She told me it was handled," I murmured. Vivian nodded. "Camille knew exactly what she was doing. You didn't hand over ownership, you just stopped asking for it." My throat tightened. A flash behind my eyes. Camille in my apartment back in 2020. Her voice low, kind, manipulative. "You deserve peace, Maddie," she'd said. "Let Logan and me carry this forward. Walk away clean, you've done enough." I believed her. I wanted to. And now I realized she'd weaponized that belief. Vivian leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "This isn't just a paperwork problem. It's material misrepresentation. If the IPO goes forward with this buried, it's a legal grenade." We dialed into a Zoom call with a seed capital analyst, a clean-cut man in a blue shirt who smiled too often and blinked too little. "We're reviewing preliminary filings," he said. "Are you suggesting there's an unresolved IP dispute?" "I'm not suggesting," Vivian said. "I'm confirming. My client holds partial, unassigned rights to Athena's core architecture, rights currently unacknowledged in Grant Tech's S1. The analyst's face tightened. "We'll escalate to our compliance team." When the call ended, Vivian closed her laptop with a snap. If this hits SEC review, she said, eyes gleaming, they won't just lose money. They'll lose the whole launch. I stared out the window. Below, yellow cabs inched past each other like circuits on a board. Camille had made her move with surgical precision, but now the blade was turning. My phone buzzed. Logan. We should talk. Privately. If you want to study denial, have dinner with someone who thinks the crown still fits. The maitre d' greeted me like I didn't belong, which was fitting. The restaurant oozed curated exclusivity, deep mahogany ambient jazz waitstaff who moved like shadows. In a corner booth half-draped by velvet curtains, Logan sat like he owned the skyline. He stood when he saw me, flashed that practiced grin. You look good, he said. Still don't believe in small talk. I came for truth, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Not niceties. He signaled the waiter, ordered a bottle I didn't ask for, then leaned in with faux sincerity. Maddie, we were kids. No one expected it to blow up like this. The scale, the pressure, things got away from us. Things didn't get away from you, I said calmly. You walked over them. Over me. He winced just barely. Look, you left. You were tired. You didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want betrayal either, I said, voice low but sharp. You used code I wrote under credentials that weren't yours. That's not a misunderstanding, Logan. That's fraud. His jaw worked behind his smile. We had to ship. You weren't there. Camille said, let's not pretend Camille speaks for anyone but herself. I folded my hands. I'm offering you something rare, a way out. Acknowledge me in the IPO filing. Publicly. Formally. That's it. Logan shifted in his seat. That's not something I can decide alone. Of course not, I interrupted. Because Camille's already decided for you. He looked confused for half a second, until Camille stepped from a table nearby, untouched wine glass in hand, heels silent on marble. She'd been listening the entire time. You're not here to negotiate, she said, settling beside him. You're here to feel relevant again. I didn't flinch. Good to see you too, Camille, I said, pulling a small USB from my coat pocket and sliding it across the table. It clicked softly against the white linen. What's inside proves I never left. Then I stood, tucked my hands in my pockets, and walked out, leaving them at their table, of lies dressed in candlelight and fear. I didn't need to go viral, I needed to be undeniable. The studio was a windowless box tucked behind a bodega on Canal Street. The walls were soundproofed with faded foam. Rachel Gibbons sat opposite me, her recorder already rolling, pen tapping against a coffee mug like a slow metronome of doubt. I remember when you first pitched me, she said, voice dry. I thought you were just another bitter dropout. So what changed? I unzipped my bag and slid over the documents one by one. Signed term sheets with unassigned IP, Git logs, NDA inconsistencies, a commit from July 2020 under my dev key used months after I left. All yours. She flipped through the stack with surgical focus. You kept everything I wrote it, I said. Of course I kept it. Still, she didn't move to write. It's not just about what's true, Rachel said. It's about what sticks. I leaned back. Then let's stick it in their throat. An hour later, we were in her cluttered office downtown. The walls were papered in legal documents, transcripts yellowed headlines. Somewhere between whistleblower and fraud scandal, she'd carved a career out of the inconvenient truth. She scanned the Git log again, zeroing in on one entry. Commit hashtag for E99A, she murmured, tagged with your original hash-edited post-resignation and authenticated, I nodded. Check the hash against the deployment repo. It's identical. Rachel paused, then opened her laptop. It took 15 minutes. One confirmation ping. She looked up, eyes sharper. All right, let's build the frame. The piece took shape over 2 sleepless nights. Vivian fact-checked. Theo weighed in on the technical language. Rachel wrote like a scalpel, clean, deliberate, lethal. By midnight, it was live. The Ghost co-founder, a startup without a face. By 6 a.m., it was trending number 3 on Startup News. 3 major VCs retweeted it without comment, which was louder than any endorsement. In the quiet after the storm, Vivian texted one sentence. This will either corner them or make them reckless. She was right. That afternoon, Theo forwarded me a screen grab from a private Reddit forum frequented by ex-Grant Tech devs. An internal email had leaked. Camille's name was on it. Subject line: containment strategy. Body. She's not a threat. She's an old file we deleted for stability. I stared at the screen and smiled. They tried to delete me quietly. Forbes printed me in glossy cover stock. The studio inside Forbes HQ was all steel and silence, designed to make people sound more profound than they felt. A ring light hummed above me. Across the glass table, the interviewer adjusted her notes, her nails tapping in even beats. "Whenever you're ready," she said, voice crisp. I took a breath, then spoke into the lens. I didn't fight to be seen. I fought so the truth didn't rot. Flashbulbs of memory followed the words, ugly, unpolished. 2019. First pitch room. Cheap coffee, expensive nerves. Logan pacing Camille in a blazer that didn't quite fit yet. And me holding the clicker whiteboard covered in Athena's earliest models. "I'll lead," I'd said. Camille touched my arm, smiled that gentle smother smile. "Let us handle the pitching. You're too intense for VCs." I swallowed it, like always. Now in Midtown, I wasn't intense. I was precise. The interview dug deeper. Technical, emotional, even personal. I kept my tone measured. No bitterness, no performative rage. Just truth, stripped down and steel-boned. Vivian waited outside when it ended, scrolling through her phone. "It drops midnight," she said. "Keep comments off for now. Let it breathe." When the article went live, it didn't just land, it detonated. Some praised it, finally, a reckoning for silenced founders. Others scoffed, another tech soap opera in heels. Vivian's advice echoed in my mind. No attacking. Let the facts bruise where they must. Don't aim for heads, just hit the mirror. By morning, newsstands across the country had the cover, "The Youngest Female Founder." They tried to forget my face, centered, no shadows, no footnotes. For a moment, I let myself feel it. Not revenge, not triumph, existence. Then my phone buzzed again. A tweet gaining traction. "Camille, every rocket burns out. Some just burn, others on the way up." I didn't reply, I didn't retweet. But I made a quiet note. That's not the sound of confidence. That's the sound of someone who hears fire behind her. The more truth leaked, the louder their lies got. It started with a headline that didn't belong to me. Ex-co-founder linked to customer data leak in 2020. Sources say. Published by Tech Justice Watch, a startup-adjacent media platform, better known for anonymous tips than verified facts. Within hours, my inbox flooded, journalists asking for comment, trolls digging through my LinkedIn, and a few too curious investors suddenly reevaluating risk. I sat at the edge of my bed reading the article for the fourth time. Fabricated quotes, distorted dates, a sinister implication that I'd been pushed out for endangering user privacy. None of it true, but all of it loud. Vivian's war room felt like a different planet. Cold, clinical, full of law students, scrambling through printed exhibits. "They're not trying to win," she said, flipping the dossier open. "They're trying to outlast you." Theo patched in over speakerphone from Ethercore, his voice tight. "I checked our archived network logs from when you transferred Athena to cold storage. There's a synthetic breach signature planted days after you left. It routes back to a masked VPN, and the endpoint traces to Camille's office login. Same device she used during final builds." The silence stretched between us. Vivian closed the folder slowly. She planted it, built a trail before lighting the match. I could have screamed, but I didn't. I could have fought dirty, but I wouldn't. That wasn't the point. "Let's draft a defamation suit," Vivian said, already typing. But I hesitated. No. I opened my own email archive, fingers moving with a new kind of clarity. I selected the entire thread, March to August 2020. Every message, every time-stamped warning, every line where Camille promised I'd remain credited in spirit. I posted them to Twitter. Raw, unfiltered, screenshot carousel. Caption simply, "I left." They kept the code, then rewrote the story. Within minutes, it spread like controlled fire. The replies were chaos. Some called it brave. Others called it calculated. But at least now they were calling it what it was: real. Then at 2:47 a.m., an encrypted email slid into my secure inbox. No subject, no name. Just a string of verified congressional credentials. Message body. "We need to talk. Someone inside the SEC flagged you as non-cooperative. It's not about IP anymore. Something bigger is brewing." I stared at the screen. and felt the floor shift beneath the fight I thought I understood. Sometimes a single line of code is louder than a lawsuit. Vivian's office had never felt quieter, even with two paralegals cross-referencing timestamps and a junior associate highlighting source code like scripture. The air smelled like coffee and tension. We sat at the far end of the firm's secure conference room, both of us staring at the polished wood table as if the war was etched into its grain. "This brief isn't just a shot across the bow," Vivian said, sliding a digital drive across to me. "It's the anchor. If we move now, we don't just accuse, we halt everything." The drive contained everything: metadata logs, unused term sheets, internal Slack, exports, my original architecture tree, all tied together in a quiet, methodical legal package. Vivian had titled it simply Athena, Source Conflict and Attribution Breach. At 4:07 p.m., we sent it to the SEC Legal Counsel under official whistleblower status. At 4:09, my pulse finally slowed. 36 hours later, it was public. SEC suspends Grant Tech IPO pending investigation of core IP dispute. The headline crawled across every news ticker in Times Square like a verdict. Below it, a stock image of Logan, jaw-tight eyes, hollow. The Prince of Polished Lies was finally looking nervous. Grant Tech issued a statement by evening. "We deny all allegations. These are coordinated disinformation attempts by a former employee who chose to step away." Vivian scoffed. "Ah, yes, the hysterical ex-founder defense. Behind the PR spin, though, cracks were showing. Analysts began to pull back projections. Journalists dug deeper. For the first time, Camille's control of the narrative wasn't absolute. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. At 11:42 p.m., a message hit my Proton inbox. No sender ID. Just plain text. "Camille's planning a counteroffensive. And it involves you personally." I read it twice. And just like that, I realized the IPO was paused, but Camille wasn't. And her next move wouldn't be in code or court. It would be personal. They paid for press. I paid in scars, and scars speak louder when they burn. It started with a shaky video clip leaked without context but saturated with implication. I sat in my apartment, eyes locked on my screen, as my own face flickered back at me, eyes red, voice raised, hands trembling. It was 2020, the off-boarding meeting. Camille's voice was calm in the footage, measured, condescending. Mine frayed. They'd cut it perfectly, cropped it down to a woman unraveling, not a founder betrayed. The video hit Tech Justice Watch within hours. Title: Maddie Grant melts down during resignation. Was she pushed out for instability? Below it, Reddit threads piled up like rot. She always seemed high-strung. Heard she threw a chair at a pitch once. I work in tech. Women like that burn themselves out. None of it was real. But it didn't matter. It felt real to the ones who wanted it to be. Theo called voice tight. We traced the upload IP to a media firm. Guess who's a silent partner? I didn't have to guess. Camille had mastered the art of setting fires from across the room. I met Rachel and Theo at a cafe tucked behind a bookstore in the village. Rain smeared the windows. My phone vibrated nonstop beside a cold espresso. Rachel scrolled through the smear threads with surgeon's fingers. Classic reputational warplay. Misdirection, emotional baiting, pseudonymous dogpiling. Theo added, "They're betting you'll blow up publicly. One loud misstep and they make you the villain of your own comeback." I didn't speak. I couldn't not through the lump forming in my throat. Rachel looked at me and said softly but surgically, "If you yell, you become their headline. If you prove, you become the headline." So I didn't yell. I filmed. That night, I sat against the wall of my apartment phone camera, pointed raw at my face. "No script, no edits," I said. "If being erased makes me emotional good, at least I know I was real. You don't fight this hard for something you imagined. You fight because it happened." I posted it with no hashtags, no tags, just truth. It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. It settled like ash, quiet, steady, undeniable. The next morning, Rachel forwarded me an email thread. Subject: whistleblower inside Grant Tech wants to meet you. Said you saved their job. Wants to return the favor. I stared at it. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled without bitterness. They tried to bury me with NDAs. They forgot some people still remember who I was before the footnotes. The rooftop bar was nearly empty, bathed in gold from nearby office towers and the quiet hush of a city pretending not to eavesdrop. I spotted her at the corner table, hood up, fingers tight around a glass of water. She looked the way I used to feel, like someone still apologizing for existing in the wrong room. "Sonia Klein?" I asked softly. She nodded once. "Maddie." We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. "I never forgot," she said before I could speak. "I was there that week. You built the integration stack. You named the Athena node clusters after Greek goddesses. It was always you." She pulled a small envelope from her coat, slid it across the table. Inside, printed screenshots, internal emails. One stood out, subject line, "PR edit round," with Camille's directive circled in red. "Remove Maddie's name from early stage materials. Keep narrative tight for investors." My hands trembled, not from shock, but from validation. "She said it was just branding," Sonia continued. "Said no one needed to know who wrote what, only who finished it. I stayed quiet, because I needed the job. But watching what they're doing to you now, I couldn't." We sat in silence. A warm breeze cut through the chill. "I didn't need a hero," I said finally. "I just needed one person to remember I was real." Later at Vivian's office, Sonia signed the affidavit, sworn, notarized, and scanned into a digital brief that would rewrite the tone of the SEC probe. The confirmation came less than 48 hours later. Internal SEC has escalated the matter. Grant Tech IPO now subject to formal fraud investigation. Asset freeze under preliminary review. Vivian turned to me, unblinking. "This isn't noise anymore. This is momentum." My phone buzzed mid-celebration. "Camille." Not a text. Not a call. A LinkedIn post. Public. "Sometimes cleaning house means cutting dead weight. See you in court." I read it once, then again. And then I smiled, because court was where truth stopped whispering. It started speaking in full volume. Sometimes the apology doesn't come from guilt, it comes from losing the upper hand. I wasn't watching CNBC when the segment started. I was answering emails, half listening to background chatter when the host's voice cut sharp through the air. "Joining us now is Logan Grant, co-founder and CTO of Grant Tech." I froze. The screen lit up with Logan in a tailored suit, face, carefully composed jaw a little too tight. Behind him, the Grant Tech logo pulsed like a ghost of every lie they'd told. The host didn't waste time. "There's been considerable controversy surrounding the origin of Athena and your company's filing disclosures. Mr. Grant, did Maddie Grant contribute to the foundational codebase?" Logan hesitated, blinked, then spoke. She built the initial framework, the earliest version of Athena. I won't deny that." My breath caught, but he added quickly, "She chose to walk away. It was her decision. The company moved forward with those who stayed." The host tilted her head. "Then why wasn't she named in your S1 filing?" Logan shifted. "That was handled by external counsel. The structure was complicated. It was a fumble. And in PR, fumbles cost more than silence." I sat motionless as the segment wrapped. The screen cut to ads. Vivian called before I could even blink. "Are you watching this?" she asked, voice like tempered steel. I just did. That wasn't a confession. That was a fracture. Minutes later, Logan's quote was everywhere. Headlines split like lightning. "Logan Grant admits Maddie co-built Athena. S1 discrepancy raises new legal questions." Camille must have called Logan right after. A snippet leaked, recorded probably by accident. Her voice venom dipped in ice. "You just signed your own indictment." By dusk, the SEC had released an official statement following on-record confirmation of co-founder status. The investigation into Grant Tech's IPO will broaden in scope and duration. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. But I did smile when another email hit my inbox. Subject: Forbes, Women of the Year. Finalist notification body. "We are honored to include you as a finalist in this year's feature series. Your journey has sparked national conversation, and we believe it's only just begun." They had tried to erase me. Now even their own were starting to rewrite the ending. When you can't erase someone's story, you distort the camera angle. The clip dropped at 7:14 a.m., posted anonymously, but anyone with eyes could trace the fingerprints back to Camille. A grainy recording of me standing in the old Grant Tech conference room, voice sharp, body tense. "You're stealing everything," I shouted. You think erasing my name means you own it. No context, no buildup, no reason. Just rage in a vacuum. By 8 a.m., it had 2 million views. By 9, headlines read, "Was Maddie Grant always unstable?" I watched the chaos unfold from my apartment window, still in pajamas, coffee going cold. Vivian called within minutes. "We can file a takedown and a defamation claim before noon." "Wait," I said. "Let them talk first." Because something had shifted. People weren't reacting the way Camille hoped. One tweet stuck out. "You call that unstable? That's called being stolen from." Another, "Trauma doesn't whisper, it screams." And it still gets ignored. By midday, Theo had tracked the clip's origin, Camille's media consultant firm again. But this time, he had something more, the full video he said forwarding the file. Unedited. I watched it. Every second. Me sitting calmly for 10 minutes raising concerns. Camille smirking, interrupting gaslighting. Then came the part Camille didn't include her words. "You're emotional. That's why no one trusts you with the pitch." That's when I'd shouted. Rachel posted the full version with a one-line caption, "Silence wasn't peace. It was suppression." The internet flipped. Fast. Within hours, they erased her, trended to #1 nationwide. I didn't gloat. I didn't repost. At a small press conference outside Vivian's office, I stood behind a single mic and said I was angry, because I was there. And they weren't telling that story. That night, the SEC email arrived. Subject: Final Decision, Equity and Status Review Body. You are hereby recognized as original co-founder of Athena Systems and entitled to full associated equity and historical attribution. I read it once. Then again. Camille hadn't just lost the war. She'd lost the narrative. They invited me to return. I smiled and kept walking. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers gold, reflecting off champagne flutes and camera flashes. The Forbes Women of the Year gala had that curated elegance that made every moment feel like a page torn from a legacy book. I stood at the edge of the stage, heels grounded, breath steady. Vivian sat near the front, her smile restrained but radiant. Theo beside her, nervously adjusting his tie. Rachel leaned against the far column, recording everything on her phone like a proud conspirator. When they called my name, the applause swelled. I stepped up to the podium. No notes. Just clarity. 3 years ago I began. Someone told me I was too intense to pitch my own idea. That I should smile more, be quieter, let others lead. I paused. Tonight I thanked that someone, because in being sidelined I learned something vital. Silence isn't weakness. It's fuel, if you survive it. A beat. Then I thank Vivian Lake for fighting when the law needed courage. I thank Theo Lynn, who reminded me that the code always remembers. And I even thank my brother Logan for finally telling one truth. A few murmurs. Then I gave them the pivot. Tonight I'm not returning to Grant Tech. I'm launching something else, something it took losing everything to envision. I clicked the remote. Behind me, the screen lit up: Athena Institute for Ethical Tech. Founder Maddie Grant. The future of innovation shouldn't be about speed, it should be about responsibility. We'll train builders who remember that truth is part of every blueprint. The room rose in applause, some clapping, some stunned. I smiled, but didn't bask. Because I hadn't built this for applause. I built it because no one gave me a seat. So, I made the damn table. Later that night, I stood inside a drafty warehouse on the Lower East Side, concrete floor, exposed beams, zero insulation, the bones of something new. Vivian crossed her arms. "This place has potential." "Exactly," I said, running a hand over the railing. "No ghosts, just foundations." She handed me the keys. I held them tightly. "I don't want to rebuild what they broke," I said, voice low. "I want to build what they were afraid of." The wind pushed through a crack in the wall. Somewhere far off, traffic hummed. It was imperfect. Raw. Ours. Back at home, an email pinged. Subject: Athena Institute. First cohort confirmed. I opened it. Dozens of names, ages 18 to 28. Boot camp grads. Community college coders. One from my old high school. At the top: "We believed your story. Now help us build ours." I stared at the screen, a quiet fire building behind my ribs. Let them keep their boardrooms and their spin. I had a blueprint for something better. You get applause for vengeance. But for ethics, just silence and notebooks. The first day of class started without ceremony. No red carpet, no anthem, no startup playlist echoing off the freshly painted walls. Just 30 students seated in staggered rows, laptops open, eyes wary. It was early January, the kind of morning where the wind cracked against the window panes and change felt like frost in your lungs. I stood at the front of the Athena Institute's main lecture hall, hands tucked into the pockets of a blazer I hadn't worn since the Forbes gala. The screen behind me was blank. What does it mean, I asked, to speak up when no one's asking questions yet? The room stayed quiet. No one scribbled. No one smiled. Perfect. Because this wasn't theater. This was blueprint. I walked them through case studies, unnamed ones, drone programs misused, hiring algorithms that learned bias, AI models trained on stolen data, stories they'd seen, headlines they'd scrolled past. But I told them how it started. Quiet emails, broken chains of command, developers who shrugged and said, "Not my call." They listened. No applause. Just pages turning and breathing held. Later, Vivian met me at a corner cafe a few blocks from the institute. Her coat still dusted with snow. "You made it sound like a sermon," she said, sliding a coffee across the table. "But a good one." They didn't clap. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to remember it when it matters. She opened her tablet. "By the way, you're trending." I raised an eyebrow. She tapped play on a podcast snippet. "And sure, Maddie Grant has a compelling origin story," said a smooth, amused voice. "But should someone so emotional about their past be leading the next generation of builders? Is she here to teach or to be worshipped?" I didn't flinch. I stirred my coffee slowly. "They'll trust your calm," Vivian said, "but they'll learn from your scars." I looked out the window. Maybe I'll never be their icon, but I can be their reason. That afternoon, in the second half of class, we opened the floor. A young woman with purple braids and a Princeton hoodie raised her hand. "What do we do?" she asked, "when we see something wrong and they call us dramatic?" I stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "Be dramatic," I said. "Truth is loud. Let them deal with it." That got a smile. And a scribble. And finally, one clap, awkward, uncertain. But enough. Later, as I packed up, Vivian hovered in the doorway. "You've got a visitor request," she said, flipping open her laptop. "Name's Evelyn Grant, my mother." The air didn't shift. My pulse didn't spike. But I closed my laptop carefully because some ghosts don't knock when they return. They ask for meetings. Sometimes what heals you isn't the apology. It's knowing they stayed to watch you rise. The metal chairs were cold paint chipping at the edges, the winter sun soft but merciless. Behind us, the Athena Institute buzzed with quiet purpose doors, opening conversations, brewing ideas, igniting. I sat with a copy of the syllabus in my hand, pages creased from the printer breath fogging in front of me. Across from me, Evelyn Grant, my mother, adjusted the sleeves of her coat. Neat gray, expensive. Her eyes didn't meet mine at first, but she was here. After years of silence, not a phone call, not a text, she had walked through the front doors of a place I built with the weight of her absence on every beam. I didn't know how to defend what I didn't understand, she said finally, voice low but steady. So I just said nothing. I didn't nod. I didn't flinch. I let the words hang unfinished. I wanted her to feel their weight too. Silence wasn't neutral, I said. It was strategy. And it almost killed me. She blinked, eyes glossy but dry. "I thought if I stayed quiet, things would calm down. That you'd come back on your own. But when I saw your name on Forbes, I realized you'd never left. We just stopped looking." A bird landed on the edge of a nearby bench, rested, then flew. Evelyn took a breath. "Do you want me to tell the family, speak publicly? Say I was wrong?" I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "You showed up. That's more than they ever did." For a while, we just sat. The wind tugged at the corners of my coat. I handed her the syllabus, Athena's first semester. She took it carefully like it might bruise. She flipped to the back. There, printed in small serif font beneath the closing quote, she found it. "For those who taught us what not to accept." She read it twice. When she stood, I did too. She placed a hand on my shoulder, not heavy, not performative. just enough to anchor the moment. "You didn't fall," she said, "and I see that now." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Behind us, the glass doors closed with a quiet seal, and the next class began. They once said I'd vanish. Instead, my silence became someone else's courage. The chairs were mismatched, the lighting soft and accidental. No podium, no printed program. Just a circle of students and the quiet hum of winter beyond Athena's walls. The closing ceremony for our first cohort wasn't grand, and that was intentional. Theo had set up a table with cookies from a local bakery and printed a makeshift banner that read, "Build what they said you couldn't." Vivian lingered near the back with her camera half lowered, capturing without intruding, and in the last row, Evelyn sat still, her gloved hands folded over the syllabus I'd given her. I hadn't planned to speak. I wanted this day to belong to them, the students who'd walked in unsure, heavy with doubt, and were now preparing to walk out with fire. But then it happened. One of them, a young woman named Kaya, stood up and quietly walked to the whiteboard. In her hands, a worn photo printed on standard paper. She turned to face the group. "This," she said, taping the photo to the corner of the board, "is from 2019. Maddie Grant in a garage still holding the marker she used to draw Athena's first diagram." The room stilled. "You didn't just survive what they did," Kaya continued. "You made it easier for us to start." And suddenly, everyone was looking at me. Not as a headline, not as a cautionary tale, as a builder, a catalyst. So I stepped forward, slow and unsure, and took the marker Kaya handed me. No speech, no script. I wrote in tall, even letters, "We don't win by being louder. We win by being heard by even one person who matters." There was no applause, just breathing, just stillness, just a pulse of recognition that echoed deeper than any microphone. As the circle began to break and people returned to cookies and goodbye hugs, a student I barely knew approached me, cradling a tablet like a secret. He leaned in and whispered, "Would you read my pitch deck?" I looked at him. His eyes were bright, nervous, hopeful. "Only if it's messy," I said, smiling without armor for the first time in a long time. Outside, the sky was bruising toward twilight, but inside Athena, it was still morning. I wasn't the villain they feared, just the proof they hoped no one would remember. The courtyard was colder than usual, even for early February. The trees stood stripped of their leaves, skeletal in the dusk light. I'd stayed late to prep a lecture on strategic design ethics, but now the chairs were empty, scattered like punctuation marks from a story almost finished. I heard the footsteps before I saw him. Logan stood near the gate, hesitant, like he was measuring the air for permission. In his hand, a plain manila envelope. No words printed on it, just a small crease down the middle like it had been opened and resealed more than once. "I figured you'd be here," he said, voice softer than I remembered. I didn't move. "You figured right." He stepped forward, extending the envelope. "It's formal," he said. "Transfer of creative attribution, retroactive. Names you as co-founder. Names Athena Systems as derived from your original framework." I stared at it but didn't reach for it. "You're late," I said, "but I guess not useless." He laughed once, empty, brittle. "I didn't know how to win without being you, so I tried to erase you instead." There it was. Not quite an apology, but closer than I expected. I let the silence breathe between us. No lecture, no dramatics. Just wind and dusk and old ghosts retreating. "Do you forgive me?" he asked, finally, the question breaking like glass between us. I met his eyes. "Forgiveness is personal," I said. "You don't have access." He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just nodded gently, like accepting a verdict he already knew. Then he placed the envelope on a chair and turned to leave. Vivian, watching from inside through the window, raised an eyebrow when I walked past her without the envelope. "You're not going to read it?" she asked. "No need," I said. "I know what it cost him." At the far end of the courtyard, a small group of Athena students pushed through the gate, laughing, notebooks in hand. One of them bumped into Logan, gave a polite, "Sorry," then walked past without recognition. Logan paused for a second, then kept walking, fading into the edge of the evening. And I stayed where I was, not as a victor. Just someone still standing. I don't teach them to win. I teach them not to vanish. The windows were open, and spring air wandered into the Athena lecture hall like it had nowhere else to be. The students, 32 in total, sat upright, notebooks closed, waiting. Not for answers, not for applause, but something else. I stood at the front of the room, dry erase marker in hand. The board behind me was blank. No slides, no outline, no announcements. Just a single question. What's worth building when no one claps? Silence. Theo sat quietly in the back row, legs crossed, arms folded, watching like someone who'd already memorized every beat of this day. Rachel leaned against the sidewall, camera pointed down, not recording, just witnessing. And in the second to last row, Evelyn sat still, her hands folded, her coat zipped too high like armor she didn't need anymore. I turned back to the students and spoke what I had practiced in no mirror. There are 3 things I know now, I said. Not because they're profound, just because I bled for them. A few leaned forward, most just watched. One, I said, holding up a finger. Truth can be delayed, but it doesn't expire. 2 people will try to erase your name, but they can't erase what you caused. And 3, if no one ever invites you to the table, don't wait. Bring your own wood. Build it. A pause settled in. Not dramatic, just full. Then a voice from the left side of the room, a girl named Marin Sharp. Quiet, brilliant, with algorithms, but always hesitant to speak. What if no one ever believes us? She asked. I didn't hesitate. Then become the kind of person you'd believe if you were watching from the dark. Her lips parted, then closed. She nodded. I walked to the door. No farewell speech. No certificate waving. Just a nod to Theo, a glance at Rachel, a hand briefly resting on the shoulder of the nearest student. Then I flicked the light switch off. Darkness. As the door clicked shut behind me, someone no one knows who walked up to the board and picked up the marker I left behind. Under my question, in clean, deliberate letters, they wrote, "She wasn't erased. She rewrote everything." The world didn't clap when she taught integrity, but it trembled when the truth she carried refused to stay buried. From erasure to recognition, Maddie Grant didn't just reclaim her name, she rewrote the rules for every voice once silenced. Like a fault line awakened, her quiet defiance shook the very ground that once tried to bury her. Because, when injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict echoes longer than any headline. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.